My next guest is Ron Burglas. He's joining us again. We really had a great conversation last time. Now, Ron is a Vistage International speaker. So if your group is looking for a speaker on topics, people that have been vetted by Vistage International speakers are top of their game. So Ron's going to talk to us today about a television show he's producing for KVCR-TV, and the subject's going to be on Parental Alienation Syndrome, which is when in a high-conflict divorce, one parent tries to turn the children against the other parent. Specifically, it's about the deficiencies in the therapeutic and judicial system that serves to make a bad situation much, much worse. It's a painful situation, but hey, this is part of life, and we're talking about life issues. Ron, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me back.
Ron, this sounds like a very difficult situation to not only be part of, but to help out in. Tell us about this. What is Parental Alienation Syndrome?
In a divorce, and I'm sure if your listeners haven't been through this themselves, they know of people who have. It's in a high-conflict divorce, as you said, when one parent tries to turn the children against the other parent. It happens all the time. The problem is that it keeps getting missed by therapists who are meant to heal the situation, and instead they make it a lot worse by missing the diagnoses. So targeted parents, the parents who all of a sudden have their children begin to behave badly towards them, don't understand what's going on. The alienating parent, the parent who has become hurt by the divorce or by the other parent, encourages the children to behave badly towards the other parent. And the therapist, who is the key to potentially healing the situation, misses what's going on in front of their face and allows the situation to become much, much worse.
I can imagine that there must be a wide range of shades of this parental alienation. Some of them may be a bit passive-aggressive and some very, very pointed, and probably depending on the ages of the children and, of course, the circumstances of the divorce as well. But why do therapists keep getting it wrong, and what could they do to get it right?
Well, it's a good question. The reason they get it wrong is because they're not required to learn about it. Simply speaking, especially child therapists who, by and large, do not get to see a lot of adult personality disorders in their practice. So they miss the two prevalent factors, two prevalent personality disorders that make up the alienating parent. And those personality disorders are narcissism and borderline personality disorder. And you have a potent mix of both personality disorders wrapped up in that alienating parent, and they present themselves beautifully, perfectly, in a psychological and a therapeutic environment. So the therapist, who, as I said, is not required to learn about parental alienation, misses the diagnosis. Now, why do they not know about this diagnosis? And it's very simple. There is a manual. It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Personality Disorders, better known as the DSM. We're now on the DSM-5. It comes out every 5 years. And that is the Bible for therapists. And if the personality disorder and or the syndrome or the dynamic is not in the DSM, the therapists are not required to learn about it. Now, I've spoken to many licensed marriage and family therapists. I've spoken to the people who train licensed marriage and family therapists. In fact, I spoke to one of the leading trainers for LMFTs in the country, and when I mentioned parental alienation syndrome, he actually got out his phone to look it up. That's ignorance. And it's not a willful ignorance. They just are not required to learn about it. That creates a dynamic in the therapist's room, which is terribly destructive. That's how come they don't know about it.
If they were to know about it and catch it and recognize what's going on, what could be the positive outcome of catching this early enough and dealing with it?
Well, another great question. What could happen if the therapist was able to recognize the dynamic in front of him. He could, in the first instance, or she, could recommend a period of time that the children spend with the targeted parent away from the alienating parent, because what happens in this situation is the children go through something called splitting, which is a phenomenon where they see everything like the alienating parent as either all good or all bad, no shades of gray. And if the alienating parent describes either overtly or covertly to the children the other parent as being bad or a threat or unhealthy for them, the children will, especially if they're younger, over time become so enmeshed with that parent that they will adopt all the psychoses that that parent has and will react terribly towards the targeted parent. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who's been through it, we'll call him Frank, it's not his real name, had a wonderful relationship with his children, and went through a very bad divorce, got permission to collect his children from school, was so looking forward to collecting them that first day from school. And when they came out, and this was maybe 2 or 3 days after the last time he'd seen them, when things were okay, they ignored him. They wouldn't talk to him. When they got back to his house, they tried to run away. When he tried to stop them from running away, they kicked him and spat at him. They called him everything under the sun, and it got much, much worse. Then for 6 months, they sat in their room with their hoods up, their blinds drawn, refused to speak or eat during the period they were with him for 6 months. Now that's horrible, isn't it? It was horrible.
That is horrible. Yeah.
And I'm talking about him as the targeted parent, but women can also be the targeted parent. You know, they can. It used to be that people thought that women were mostly the alienators, but in fact, that's no longer the case, and maybe never was. It really, in the end, boils down to who really is the damaged parent. And in so many cases, in fact, in all these alienating cases, the healthy parent is the targeted parent. But because the therapist cannot see that and doesn't recognize it when they're in front of him, it makes it so much worse.
Okay, so I get the picture now, and it makes a lot of sense, and that's a horrible situation you just painted, but I'm sure in some scale it's happening in a lot of situations, because a lot of times during a divorce, one parent was hurt for one reason or another, and now they're acting out about it. And it seems to me that there's a lot of marriage and family counseling available pre-divorce, but in this situation, post-divorce or maybe even post-separation, when it's really, the wound is really the worst, there should be some kind of a recommendation at that point to say, hey, you're going through something, you need to talk to someone, you need post-marital counseling. Is that kind of what we're getting at here?
Well, yeah, I mean, post-marital counseling at that point, when the marriage is irretrievably broken down, most parents don't think about going into counseling. They think about getting what they want, whatever they can get, and going to court. And that's part of the destructive process. And I would suggest that whenever possible, to keep the divorce process out of the courts and out of the hands of lawyers. That would be one great way to avoid this terrible, terrible dynamic. There are companies that actually will sit down with you and will mediate with you and the other parent, charge a fraction of what it costs to go through the courts, and you will sign a contract to do with finances as well as custody and all other matters related to divorce, which is far more peaceful and lacking in acrimony than anything that could possibly happen in court, which is by its very nature adversarial and destructive. And then it boils down to how much money have you got? And if you have a lot of money, if you are the alienating parent, you can easily just stop the whole process by making the other parent spend so much money, they run out of money, can no longer continue in court, and lose simply through their lack of finance.
Yeah, that's a case in point that happens a lot, I'm sure. In the situation, it occurs to me that the first professionals to recognize that there's going to be potential problems based on hostility or anger or hurt would be the attorneys. And of course, wouldn't it be wonderful if they would say, hey, let's make this, let's not bring the kids into this. You have some anger issues, you need to see somebody, but that's not going to happen. So then it comes down to...
No, in fact, In fact, what happens is the children get their own lawyer. They get their own advocate, so you wind up with 3 lawyers in court quite often. And the reality is, Bill, is that children deserve to be loved by both their parents, and they deserve the right to love both their parents equally. And if that's the basis upon which you enter into this process, and many people do, many people manage to make the divorce quite a civilized procedure. But in these cases, and there are thousands of them, Bill, and it's, there are people out there who say that parental alienation doesn't exist. There's the National Organization of Women who made some pretty inflammatory remarks back in 2012 saying that really it's just a disguise for abusive fathers to get a hold of their children. Well, if you read any of the experts, if you read anything by William Burnett, Dr. William Burnett, who's the professor emeritus of psychology at Vanderbilt University, who will be on my show, who will be interviewed on my show, when I asked him why he fights this fight, because he has no personal stake in it, his response was, because we're right. There's Linda Kase-Gottlieb, who's got a fine book on parental alienation out. If you go to her website, Gottlieb is Gottlib, Linda Gottlieb, she has all the paperwork you could possibly need, templates, if you want to record, to help you, as a targeted parent, hold on to your children. But I would suggest to any targeted parent that may be out there right now, that the most important thing you can do for your children, because they are not, you can't get back at the other parent. It's not about revenge. It's about the children. And that no matter what those children do to you or say to you, the reality is that they want you there. They will do everything they can, say everything they can to get the underlying feeling, the foundation in those children, because they are your children, is that they want you there. And if you can persist through all the abuse and the condescension and all of the things that the other parent does and just continue to love their children, you really do stand a fighting chance of getting your children back, especially if you fight hard and fight early to maintain your visitation with those children. That's important.
So for a targeted parent who realizes what's going on and they feel like they're helpless because they can't really stop the person from saying or doing things that would alienate the kids against them, what can they do? What are some steps they can take under the current system to get their children back emotionally?
Arm themselves with information. Read about borderline personality disorder. Read about narcissistic personality disorder. Read anything by Dr. Craig Childress, Childress. Listen to his videos. Watch his videos on YouTube. Read anything by Amy Baker, who's one of the foremost writers about parental alienation in the country. Arm yourselves with information is probably the best thing you could do. And if you don't mind me making the plug, go to Indiegogo, to my website there, which is Parental Alienation, Educate the Therapists. Help me produce this show, which will go right to the heart of this topic. And hopefully, if we can, change the dynamic, get parental alienation syndrome into the DSM. It is in there, quite a lot of it is already in there without actually saying those words, but if we can get it in there, therapists will be obliged to learn about it, and things will improve in those therapeutic offices dramatically.
Very important topic, and again, if you can help out, go to Indiegogo, and what is it called under the Indiegogo website again?
Parental Alienation, Educate the Therapists.
Very important. Can you imagine what a difference this could make in the lives of children, which is, at the heart of everything that we all want to do is to make life easier for people out there. And the difference that this could make by helping therapists to recognize this early on so that they can stop or slow or change the behavior of an alienating parent could be a tremendous way to help out. And Ron, I can't wait to see your show. It's going to be on KVCR TV. Again, the subject's going to be Parental Alienation Syndrome. How can we keep tabs on when the show is going to be coming out? By visiting your website?
Certainly visiting my website. I've also got a website for my television show, which is insightwithronberglass.com. It will be on there, and just check with KVCR. I will certainly be putting it on the website as soon as we have the funds. We're almost there. This is the third part of the campaign. We're almost there. It just, you know what it's like to raise funds. It's a business that you have to go through, like an actor has to memorize lines. But once you're there, we're going to put together a first-rate show that I hope will really change the dynamic. That's the important thing, to help the children not go through this terrible, terrible process.
I love the idea of it. I love where your heart is with this and the way you're approaching it. I think this is one of those things that, again, can make differences in the lives of children ultimately by taking this first step. So help Ron out to get there, and let's all tune in and learn more about this. And if you're a parent that's going through this, then again, we've given you a lot of great resources. We'll also post those in our show notes when we put this on back up on our podcast site. Ron, a pleasure to talk with you once again. Thank you so much for joining us, and the best wishes and best of luck on the project.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks very much.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back after this, so please stay with us.